Hi everybody and welcome to another Tiger Does Everything video. It's going to be an art video today, and in this case I'm going to be talking to you about using thumbnails in your drawings. Now this is a piece of advice that I'd seen countless times on those how to be a better artist list. It was like the second thing that happened right after draw every day, and it was never explained. I had no idea what it actually meant. And even asking other people, hey, what are thumbnails? They would just be like, oh, they're little miniature drawings, but they would never actually explain why they were important or how to use them. And so this is what we're going to be doing today, and it's going to be showing you just these techniques that I've picked up and kind of made for myself. And I find these very helpful, and since I started doing them, I've noticed that my art has really improved. You can do these on paper as well. I'm just doing it on the art program on my computer, so it's easier to record. Now, what an actual thumbnail is, it's the roughest of the rough drafts of your art. It is the miniature version of what you want your final piece to be. And the reason I find them helpful is because it lets you change the layout, change the position, the angles, the actual design of your piece without actually wasting all of your time and effort, and if you're doing it on pen and paper, your actual paper. So what you start out with are basically just boxes that are close to the same dimension as your final piece is going to be. And we're going to just start figuring out what you want to draw. Okay. And like I said, this is the roughest of the rough drafts, so sloppy is perfectly fine. And what I'm going to be drawing today is a piece that will be in a later art series that I'm doing. Kind of Jurassic Park, Jurassic World inspired. In this case, I'm doing a megalodon in her enclosure, with this being here is like the viewing pod that it is going to be underwater. So I'm positioning the pods and then the actual shark. Let's have her coming down here. Her tail's up there. Sort of like she's investigating the pod. And then there'd be itty bitty people inside. And there is, like, this is the very first, as rough as you can get it, rough draft. And just seeing it, looking at it there, I'm not liking how the pod is up right in the center and how Meg is up in the corner. So let's see what else we can do with her. And this is, I have it as a landscape here. So let's see what it would be like if I did... Oh, sorry, that's the port. Let's see what it would look if I did a portrait size. Okay, so instead of that, let's do it this way here. And because this will bring, the pod will be less upright, up front and center. And let's see, maybe Meg isn't looking at them, she's actually swimming off. And you can enter, and then you can exit, and there's the pod. Again, I'm not liking the actual portrait. I think I'm going to prefer to stick to a landscape view. Just because I can actually put more actual movement into it. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to bring the actual pod just right over here. So it's no longer the most prominent thing in the image. It's almost like it's secondary or incidental. And we're going to make Meg much more prominent. and kind of sort of a little bit fish-shaped. So the way she's positioned here is she's basically ignoring this, and her attention is on you as the viewer, which I'm thinking is a lot more dynamic than either of these two that we have here. So this would actually give us our layout. So we'll have the pod here down in the corner, possibly even almost off screen. So let's do one more here, another in landscape, and let's see how it would look with the pod just completely moving off to the side, so we don't even have the entrance. The entrance would be over here off screen. There would be little bodies right up against the glass because she's what they're coming to see. And again, she's looking at us. So this is her nose, and this is the top of her head, and her body comes out this way. I'm doing her tail backwards, I noticed that. And this way her movement is coming at us. So it's almost as if we're in our own viewing pod right here looking in at her. So there we go. And this is showing just the progression of how we're setting it up. It's almost like a storyboard, but without like the actual changing of action. We're just changing how we want everything positioned. And as you can see here, it's a little kind of, it's not very clear because it's just a picture that I used off of my my camera, but this is what you can do with it on paper. And you can see I did the same sort of changes, like I went changing it from landscape to portrait, changed where I was positioning the pod, changed where I was positioning her, and this was the final secondary rough draft, I'm going to call it, because I'm going to adapt off of this, but all of these were adapted off of my thumbnails. And you can see what I did. I brought my underground pod off to the side, and I have Meg front and center in the middle, and she's looking directly at us, so her attention is coming this way as if we're viewing her from the outside. Instead of her being investigating these guys, we want it so it's more dynamic that she's looking at us and we're looking at her. Okay, and these can work in any kind of artwork that you're doing. I find this really good if you wanted to do positioning of backgrounds as well. So both of these images with the pod and the shark, they're both in the foreground, but in the background this is where you would be wanting to position things, like, since it's an underwater scene, different seaweeds, the way the sun would be filtering down. And then you can also change the direction of the lighting. So if we decide, no, we don't want it that way, the sun is actually coming from this way. And just different animals that you might be seeing in the background, other little fish, pretend that's a fish. She actually looks more like a dolphin, but considering it's basically a stick figure, that's fine. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep it stick figure. You don't want any kind of actual details going in this. You don't want to put in the effort. This is just, think of it, if you're writing a story, this would be when you're doing the graph plot. You're not even putting in like different storylines or anything like that. You're just putting, this is the first thing that happens, secondary, this, that. You don't want to put any detail in this, because I find it really takes away when you start doing your actual picture of it, that it takes away when you actually start putting details up here. Like in here you can see she's basically like a bean, and then here, while still being a rough draft, I'm having it's more detailed. And I find it very helpful to put notes to myself if I'm writing, drawing on paper. Like here, why does she look so appalled? It's like it gives me references for when I'm doing the final piece to remember what I disliked about it. Because if you're ever looking at a piece of your old artwork that isn't finished yet, and you say there's something wrong here, and if you're doing a thumbnail like this, you're able to immediately see what's wrong there. And I just leave a little note to myself, like here, I'm not liking the positioning of her mouth, so what I'm going to do is bring her head down a little, just so she doesn't look like she's shocked or somebody stole her last cookie. I hope this was helpful to you, and as always, be sure to subscribe, and if you aren't already, check me out on Patreon. I'll leave the link below in the description, and I hope everybody has a great day. Love you all. Bye!